Over here I have the oil kit from Maximal Performance, and so it has pretty much everything you need to actually install this thing. Also comes with a thermostatic sandwich plate, which is nice, and if you are getting a oil kit for a daily driver, I suggest actually getting a thermostatic one. Comes with instructions on how to put it all together, and it's obviously packed a lot nicer than this. I've already opened it, went through everything, and didn't really put it back together properly. First off, you got the cooler itself, which is a 13 row from Sousa, I guess, not sure how to say it, but this is a pretty famous brand, so a lot of people and companies use this one. Then you have the mounting stuff to mount it to the car, which is specifically for the BRZ. You got the spacer that just goes under the sandwich plate, which has a thermostat, and this is the adapter for the thread for the oil filter to screw onto. And then you have all the fittings you need, which screw into here and into the lines, which are already set up, and it's all properly cut to length, which is nice. I thought I'd do a nice detailed overview of the kit and installing it on the car, and it'll be a nice test because I'm actually going drifting in a couple days, so we'll see how the temps are driving there and on the track itself. Looking inside of here, so you can see I just kind of placed this right here for now, and I jacked up the car just so I could see the bottom. So I just realized reading the instructions, it actually does give instructions on how to do this without taking off the bumper, which is just taking off these splash guards from under the car and then kind of mounting it off the car and then I guess putting it back in. But for me, I think just taking off the bumper is easier, and just don't touch this stuff. I found the instructions a bit vague. I mean, trial and error, you can kind of figure it out. But what I'm thinking so far, so you got these two mounting brackets that come, and it does tell you to mount it on the splash guard with the holes that are towards the center, which the only two that seem to fit, so you can kind of line it up, one here, one on that hole, and then this will mount on top. And if you look at the bracket, there's actually this one hole that's not threaded and these two are threaded, so the one that's not threaded is the one that's going to be attaching to the splash guard. And from the hardware, I'm taking the two long bolts, two nuts, two washers, and two of these locking washers. And the way this looks like it goes, so the non-threaded one goes over this hole, and actually this hole from the bottom, if you see, actually I forgot to show this. So this clip comes off, and then same for under the other hole, this clip comes off. So I'm assuming you can't use these anymore, so these are now extra clips, and it's going to be replaced by these bolts. Alright, a little change of scenery. I just got destroyed by a storm outside and had to move the car. So I'm going to let this dry up and then come back in like a few minutes, and all my stuff's soaked too. All my tools got soaked. Forgot what I was saying last, but I'll just repeat myself just in case. Mounting brackets, looks like they go with the threaded facing a bit out on this one, and then where's the other one? I'm going to put the bolt from the bottom up, just so that the extra bit that sticks out is not sticking out down. I was actually going to put it this way first, but just in case, so I don't have extra, you know, the end of the bolt sticking out and might hit the ground or something, I'm going to put it this way with the big washer on the bottom so it's against the plastic. And the locking washer, oh, no, that's not good. So these brackets go in like this with the two holes on the outside edge. And now the rest of the hardware is just bolts and washers, which screw into the threaded sides with this on top. So I got everything apart again. After I tightened it, I kind of realized something. So initially I said to mount this way with like the mounting holes on the outside. What's happening, I didn't realize at first, I might need a light.
if you can see, there's a gap over here in between the cooler and the bracket, and that's because if you see here, right on the tip of my finger, there's this tab that sticks out and it looks like it's hitting the bracket. So when I'm trying to screw it down, it's not really laying flat. So I thought, okay, maybe I put these backwards, because if you flip it this way, then at least on this side, the tab now is actually leaning against this side of the bracket, but it's gone down and now this lays flat. But the issue with this is that if I also flip this side, now the holes don't line up because the holes are like under here now. So I'm not sure what's going on. I'm not sure if I'm doing this wrong or something's wrong with the mounting setup here. This is what I'm doing. That's the tab that I filed down. So this is what I still have to do. So you can see if I put a bracket on top, it leans on it. On this side, it sits pretty much flat. You can kind of see it still because it is a little dip there, so it looks like it's on there, but it's a lot better now. I'm going to try to file a little bit better, but I'm trying to be careful not to file off the paint on the rest of it. I will paint over this again because I don't want the metal just exposed. I'm going to do it to the other side and it should be better. I also did email the company that I bought this from to see what they say. I told them I don't know if it's my fault or something's wrong here. For now, I'm just going to do this, get it mounted, and then I'm just curious to see what they say, but I just want to get this done right now. Both sides are ground down now, so they're kind of nice and flush. And just because there's metal at the top, I'm going to just paint it real quick. I'm back at this point again, so you can see now. Tab is ground down and I painted it again. So it should sit nicely. So again, I'm going with the holes facing out, which I'm pretty sure is right based on the picture and the instructions. But now it's sitting flat, which is nice. So I'm going to do the sandwich plate now, which goes right here on the oil filter. Gonna take the 22mm to AN10 fittings, and it's gonna go on this. And on this kit, at least the O-ring didn't come like attached to it, so the O-ring just goes on the edge there. When that's set up, this thing can come off. So now before putting all of these, just on the rubber seals, I'm going to put some oil on it just so it seals a little better. It's the same thing you would do with the oil filter. And I'm actually reusing mine. If this is a new one, obviously oil it up. I'm going to oil this thing and the top of this one. First up, the spacer can go on. That one just drops on. Then the sandwich plate. That just sits on top. I'm going to be angling these just out here because the lines are going to come and there's just enough space for it. Maybe a bit more. Then is this adapter extension kind of thing. Oh, this way. For tightening this adapter, it's actually around, I think, 25 foot-pounds, just based on what people are saying. It doesn't say anything in the instructions I have about torquing it. Just to be safe, it is the oiling stuff, so you don't want anything to leak. I actually had to go out and buy a 27mm, and also if you are using a socket like over here, it's very tight, so the socket doesn't actually go in all the way. So depending which socket you have, this one just barely holds onto it. So I saw online a lot of people had to like file this down or grind it down on the edge just to make it a little more skinnier, so it can actually fit in this small gap here. But I'm gonna go use it and torque it to 25 foot-pounds. Now running these lines, there's a 90-degree side and a 45-degree side. The 45 will go up to the oil filter and this will be on top of the oil cooler. So I think most people run it right under here, so right on top of this. Then up here, I'm putting the longer of the two hoses on the right side, so driver's side, and the short one on the passenger. Okay, this is a total mess right now. I'm not sure if this kit is messed up or if I'm messing up installing this, but as you can see, I've now moved it from those two holes, which is right in the center, to this side, because once I put those lines in, I realized it doesn't even reach down there. So I have it screwed in now, but I could not reach this far one all the way there. This one could kind of reach, but it was still very tight. But there was no way I could get any of the lines on the far side. Up here, you can see I actually ended up just taking the air box out and I'm just holding it up with this. So I screwed them in. You can see the angle that it goes down. And then this part I know is right, so you gotta put it right under the neck of this bottle. And now here it was also a little tricky. So there's no videos on anyone else installing this or a picture of it on the car, which is a bit weird. Like even the company that sells this kit doesn't actually show any pictures of it on a car. So this is where it comes out. And I thought it would run around this way, which most kits do. But again, that was also making it even shorter because the path was too long and it would barely reach. I got this line, which is the far one, which is the one on the right side. So I got it here, right under the headlight, and then in this small gap here, comes down and into here. And then the other one, if I put it through here too, which is, I kind of liked it because it's nice and tucked in, but it's just that the angle of it would not screw in nicely. So this one I had to run around under this. There's a bit of gap underneath, so I just kind of shoved the line up this way and it just squeezed in, and it's right here and into here. Now the other thing is down here. So I just say I moved this cooler off to the side, but now the hole over here and here, so it's the same thing as these holes, it's just over here, but this gap is way bigger. So on this end I only have the one bolt that could fit because the other hole was coming all the way out here, and this side I managed to put both of them. So if I had both of them here, I couldn't have both here, and if I had both here, I couldn't have both of them here. You do need at least one side with both of them, otherwise this would rotate, and it's pretty good on there. I'm assuming this is not the right way to do it. This is literally the only way I could figure out to make this thing work. Like I said before, I did email the company. I emailed them about the brackets. I didn't even know about the lines being kind of short. So once they replied to me about that, I'll try talking to them about the lines as well. Now there's a huge possibility that I'm doing this completely wrong, so this is at no fault to the company, but it just seems weird that this is the only way I could figure out, and the instructions are so vague that it's hard to tell. Pictures that are on this thing, one is just that, which is really dark and it's hard to actually see, and it's also not on the car. On the back is just a picture of the sandwich plate partially assembled there. I don't find it very helpful. The text is not really specific. I actually have a few friends that got this kit as well at the same time. We bought a bunch of them. I haven't seen how they set up exactly, but a couple of them are completely different front end setups, so the overall setup was mounted a little differently. I'm gonna see if I can make sense of it. At least I got it to mount for now. I still have to actually start the car and get the oil filled and make sure nothing leaks. But now that this thing is mounted up, I'm gonna make sure everything's tight. Another thing I had to do, man, the fitment on this thing is just crazy. As I was tightening these two down, I noticed this one I couldn't really turn because the cap was in the way. So I took off the cap, tightened it so I had more space for the wrench, and then I realized when I tried to put this back, I actually couldn't because the corner of this hex right here was just sticking out, so that which edge is it? This edge would hit it when turning and it wouldn't spin. So I had to like shave this down a bit right on the edge, and now it just actually it still rubs, but it can still pass. Can it? Barely. But you can see, it's probably gonna need some more. So I'm gonna run the car for just a few seconds, turn it off, make sure there's no leaks, and then run it again. And then obviously this thing takes more oil, so you will have to add oil to the car, and it should be about a quart or less. I think most coolers do take a quart, and I think this is on the smaller side. I did say I was gonna just start the car for like a few seconds, but I did find out you can actually just let the car crank without actually starting it by stepping on the gas and the clutch at the same time and just holding your the pedals down while you press the button. And what that will do, it'll just let the oil pump start circulating the oil, and it should help fill up all the gaps in the cooler. So clutch, gas all the way down, and I think you just press it once and press it again. Actually, I did check the oil level right before I did that, so if it did go down, that does mean the cooler got filled a little bit. The level did look like it went down very slightly. It's not like all the way to the low, so should be fine. I'm gonna try to do one more time and I'm gonna fill up the oil. I just realized too that because this has a thermostat in it, it's not actually opening until the car heats up. So there's probably not a lot of oil actually going to the oil cooler when I like prime the car. These sandwich plates are also still designed to always be slightly open, so there's some kind of flow. That's just, I think, to avoid any air to get into the system. But to get this to fully open, I do have to get the car up to 180, I think, 180 degrees Fahrenheit. So I'll let it run for a bit. I'm gonna keep my eye on the oil level and fill it as I need. So you don't actually need to let the car heat up because this thing went all the way down to low. So good thing I stopped because it does fill up pretty quick. So you don't really need to let this thermostat open up or anything. So I'm gonna go fill it up back to full. And then just to show how I tied up all the piping, one zip tie just around both the pipes and around the neck of this, just so it doesn't move too much. Then coming down here, it may look like a lot of zip ties, but just trying to be cautious. For the bottom pipe, the short one that's to this side, I kind of just zip tied it here, so it's tucked under here. This one is for the top one and also covers the bottom one again down here, right under here. I put one here onto the cooler just in case these give out, and I just don't want this flopping around, or it'll still flop around, but I just don't want it to like fall off or anything. So this is just a backup. And then I did a couple small ones there, just where it's rubbing against the metal. I just put it like a little buffer between the piping and the metal, just in case. I don't know if that really does anything, but everything's pretty solid. Like the pipes won't move around. This one, just a little bit, but it should be fine. With the bumper on, it's not bad. I think the bottom is slightly getting blocked, but it's a pretty decent spot. I was just worried that because I moved it this side, I thought maybe this edge would be like behind this, but the whole thing's like right in the open, so that's nice. It's now just under 2 weeks from the first time I installed the oil cooler. I basically drifted with it, daily drove to work, highway driving, kind of city driving. I don't do too much of it, but overall I'm satisfied with it. My temps were way lower than I had before. Overall, for sure, I'm happy with this. I'm definitely benefiting from this. The car's benefiting from this, and it's definitely doing what it's supposed to do. Although I liked it, obviously throughout the video you kind of saw I had some issues I had to deal with. First set of issues I had was obviously the like physical install of it. Nothing was lining up for me, and as you saw, like I had to mount it on the side. The instructions wanted you to put like right in the center. Mine ended up here on the driver's side, and that was because of two things. One, the mounting brackets they gave didn't actually line up with the holes properly, and two, the hoses I got were short. So whether or not the mounting brackets were correct, I wouldn't have been able to put in the center because my hoses were too short. And the mounting bracket thing, I have no idea what happened with that. So I did say I emailed the company, or I think it was the owner of the company, and like I sent pictures and everything, and we talked about it, and honestly have no idea why it's not lining up, which is weird. So the way I had it mounted up first is when I had the issue with the tabs leaning on top of it, which is what the first picture I sent to him, and then he suggested to flip the brackets over, which I tried anyway before, but then it wouldn't line up with the holes on the splash guard on the car. After I sent those pictures, we honestly had no idea why it's not lining up. He said he never had issues with it before. I mean, it was whatever. Either way, I ended up on the side. I had to do it anyway, so no big deal to me. Then the next thing was the hoses. That also is just unfortunate that my hoses ended up being kind of short. Not sure at what point it got messed up, but it was whatever. Because I had both of those issues, either way, it was never going to be in the middle. So other than that part, which is kind of unfortunate, I would think for most people that would have been annoying. To me, I mean, it's no big deal. Overall, I think the price of it is still worth it. And that's like such a small issue that, you know, if you have normal tools and stuff, moving something over is not that big of a deal. Now that I have it, it's still mounted up using the original brackets. It's just not mounted the way it was supposed to mount, and it seems to be holding because I drifted with the car and it's still there. The other issue was with the sandwich plate there. Everyone who has this kit, and even other kits, have this issue, but I think a lot of kits use that specific sandwich plate, which is from a different company.
called Mocal, I think that's from. That thing, the biggest issue is just torquing that down. I had to buy that socket, which also doesn't fit by itself, and I had to file down the edge of it because that sandwich plate is just designed where the hex that you need to tighten is so close to the edge that the socket doesn't fit well. The torque value that I see most of the time is like around 25, 27, I think is what I saw, that people say to torque that thread adapter, and I don't think I ever got to it because the torque wrenches would not get there before the socket actually just slipped off the nut. So now what's happening is that this whole unit is just loosening up this way, but then since this oil cap's over here, it kind of stops there. So it's not gonna loosen itself out completely. I mean, the filter could, but the filter hasn't. It's just the sandwich plate on the spacer at the bottom. It's moved over so much that I can't even open it because it's tied up against this. I'm pretty sure anyone with an oil kit that's using these AN lines would have this issue. And then while I'm up here, I'm gonna put a clip right now of me just wiping the bottom of this. And now, as you can see, I do have, I think, a small leak coming from just this one. Couldn't tell if it's just dirt. I'm pretty sure it's oil because it just keeps coming back every time I wipe it. What I'm actually gonna do, I'm gonna do off the video, but I'm going to take this whole thing apart and I'm going to put some Teflon tape on all the threads, which I should have done at the start, to be honest. But every time I saw people use AN lines, I've never seen anyone really use the tape. And while I'm taking everything apart, I'm going to just try to torque this again and try to actually get it to the proper value and see if that makes a difference with this loosening. And so this was the socket again, and you can see I filed down the tip of it, but it wasn't enough, to be honest. It did kind of help, but I kind of got lazy and I thought it would be just fine. But I'm gonna actually spend more time later, file this down as thin as I can, and try to actually torque that and see if that helps. And lastly, the only other concern I had was with the actual temps. On the way to the drift event, which was like the day after I finished installing this completely, that was my first drive, so I wasn't sure if this was an issue or not because I didn't really have time to look it up. On the way there, it was like 90% highway, and on the highway, I was barely making it to 160 degrees Fahrenheit, or I was hovering about that much like 1 hour into the drive. And if you don't know, 160 is about the minimum you kind of want to have it, at least for this car, where you would consider it, you know, up to temp, and that's when you can like floor it or do whatever. So I was just concerned it was too low, but then actually when drifting and stuff, obviously the temps went up and it was still, you know, reasonable. I wasn't really paying attention to the temps when actually drifting, but I'm sure it was like in the low 200s, which is perfectly good. But as for the 160 on the highway, looking it up, it is pretty common to be in that low because obviously on the highway got a lot of wind cooling the oil. I will probably be switching to 0W20 oil on my next oil change because that will help heat it up a little bit more. I have 5W30 right now, which I switched over to when I was without the oil cooler because that kind of helps it stay a bit cooler and keeps the oil pressure up. But now that I have the oil cooler, I want to see if I can go back to the 020 and still have a good amount of temp. Because I have the oil cooler plus a heavier oil, it takes a while for the car to warm up. I mean, unless this is just a track car, then you kind of want to stay a bit thicker. So to end it off, overall, the Maximal Performance Kit, totally happy with it. I had like those issues, but I don't think it's that big of a deal. I would buy this again if I had like another BRZ for some reason. All the parts seem to be pretty decent. So as of now, for short-term quality wise, it's totally fine. Price wise, it's a lot more affordable and cheaper compared to other kits, and you're still getting like the same parts basically. The only thing is probably like the bracket system. Some of the other companies make it way fancier, but it worked and my old temps are exactly what I need.